Greetings. My name is Manuela Arciniegas, Executive Director of Communities for Just Schools Fund, and this is our podcast, Beyond the Bell, Organizing for Ed Justice. Our podcast is committed to bringing you the voices, dreams, and brilliance of community organizers activating the public will for education justice. We know communities deserve to feel safe, dignified, and loved, irrespective of their race, economic status, zip code, gender, and ability. However, this is not the case for the majority of youth of color, queer, disabled, or undocumented communities. Today's public schools in our communities are not yet safe places to learn, grow, and thrive. Organizers around the country are working to change this. But how do we get there? Today, we will hear about the hopes, dreams, and victories, as well as the collective wisdom of youth organizers from Students Deserve, a youth community organizing group from Los Angeles, California. They're working to ensure that Black and brown, queer, and immigrant youth feel safe, loved, and invested in, not criminalized and punished. A little bit about today's episode. Our first guest is Joseph Williams. He is the Executive Director of Students Deserve, a youth-centered organization working to smash the school-to-prison pipeline. Students Deserve has achieved historic victories for the thousands of young people in the LA Unified School District, and we're so excited to hear about how they made that happen. Through our conversation with Joseph and Kahlila Williams, one of their youth organizers and alumni, we're going to hear about how young people build power, change systems, and ensure that our young people have agency and are redesigning the public education system and building safety in their communities. And so let's talk to our guests. Joseph, you've been organizing at the intersections of racial, social, economic, and education justice for more than a decade. And you've helped lead campaigns that have unionized hundreds of working class people, divesting over $100 million from police and investing hundreds of millions more into the resources and supports that Black youth and other racialized and marginalized communities demand. You are super powerful, Joseph. We're so happy you're here. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you, Manuela. It's so good to be on here. I really appreciate you and CJSF for inviting us.
We're so inspired by you and all of the folks you've helped develop, and one of them is here with us. Kahlila Williams is an alumni and youth organizer with Students Deserve. She's also pursuing her PhD in K-12 education policy at USC, studying student organizing in the school-to-prison pipeline. Kahlila's organized around ending state-sanctioned violence, especially the school-to-prison pipeline. She's organized to bring more resources and supports to foster youth and so much more magic that you're doing out in the world. Kahlila, how are you?
Hello, Manuela. I'm doing well. Thank you for the invite. It's so good to be in community and space with you.
And we're so happy y'all said yes, because I know you're wrapping up your summer of building so much power and developing the leadership of so many young people in LA. We are so grateful. I was wondering if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself. And I'll start with you, Kahlila. Like, who are you out in the world? How did you come to this work? And how did you find Students Deserve?
Yeah, so it was 2020. Everything was going on in the world, COVID and isolation. And then, of course, we know the unfortunate killings of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor at the hands of police was sparking like nationwide protests. And at the time, I was kind of just noticing everything going on, but not really knowing like what I could do or how I could get involved. And one of my teachers at my school sent me some information on a General Assembly that Students Deserve was having, kind of talking about, at first it was about the ending of pepper spray being used on children. And for me, I was like, wait, pepper spray is being used on kids? Like, I did not know that. That's crazy. And so just like the headline kind of sparked my interest. So when I attended the meeting, I kind of was just there off camera, just kind of seeing like what was being talked about. And then there was all these statistics of like how Black students have been criminalized for years within our school district and like all of these different things happening. And it really connected talking about like the school to prison pipeline and how that exists. And for me, it connected a lot of things of like what I have felt personally in my own life. I knew for a while, especially like attending schools where there were school police, it never made me feel comfortable. But knowing that this was all like part of a whole like historical plan, I was like, yeah, that everything's starting to make sense now. And then soon after, I started to realize like that my own experience with a school police officer at my high school, where he accused me of having a drug overdose from passing out due to dehydration, was kind of connected to that as well. And so it made me like realize like, okay, like, yeah, like they know what they're talking about, and like, how can I get more involved? And at the time when I first got involved, our campaign switched to the defund school police movement. So I got involved in that and have been involved ever since, going on 5 years now. And I've truly found a space in a community. I found my voice. I've realized agency. I started a chapter at my school and have helped people continue that chapter. And now I work with Students Deserve. So it's really become a full circle moment for me. But yeah, and now I've brought that into my education. When I went to my undergrad at UCLA, I knew that I didn't want to just do something that was going to get me a degree, but how could I make change? And how can I also bring organizing into academia? And so I've done research on bringing youth organizing into spaces of academia and talking about how the Black Student Achievement Plan actually came to be, and that it was youth organizers and not just a school board vote. And I'm kind of continuing that work now while I pursue my PhD, just talking about how youth organizing impacts educational policy at a great deal, whether people realize it or not.
It's such a powerful story, Kahlila. I mean, like in 5 years, you got on the path. You're like so clear about what you're going to do and how you're going to contribute to making the world a better place. And what about you, Joseph? What legacy do you stand on that has brought you to this powerful leadership role in organizing? And what life experience has brought you to fight for education justice?
Big questions, but really I'm a vessel to support youth leaders like Kahlila. But, similar to Kahlila in some ways, me and my family dealt with a lot of homelessness, housing insecurity, poverty, and school pushout and criminalization at school. I started getting suspended from school or removed from class as early as I can remember. That over the years led to more and more interaction with law enforcement. And so I think one of the first times that I got arrested, I didn't get charged with anything, but I was a middle schooler and I was literally hanging out with my friends after a high school basketball game. And I don't even know what happened that led the police to being called. But me and my friends were doing nothing other than hanging out after the game and ended up getting handcuffed, put in a police car, interrogated. And I think I was like 11 at the time. Fast forward a couple of years, again, because of some of the housing insecurity, instability in my own family, led to me trying to find a lot of community, trying to find releases, trying to find support, and also in some ways, bringing some of that trauma into school. So by the time I was a freshman in high school, I had been repeatedly kicked out of school, suspended, and then ultimately I ran away from home. I got put in a group home, and also from there was charged with assault and battery and put on probation. And I was 13 years old. And so from there, being in the system, I went back to my school and I had a probation officer on campus, and every single thing that happened at school was a violation of my probation. So every time I got in trouble or got suspended after that point, I was reincarcerated. I would literally get picked up from school or sometimes from home by the police and taken to a juvenile detention center where, if any of y'all have been incarcerated, you know that process literally is dehumanizing. As a child, I was forced to strip naked and get strip searched by adults and be put in a concrete cage with metal bars, and had that experience happen to me repeatedly. And I was also really lucky in that I had a lot of educators and folks in my community and coaches and other people who were like, nah, we're going to love on you. We're going to yes, hold you accountable and say we have higher expectations for you, but also try to provide you with resources and support systems and whatever, because we believe in you. And so I was really lucky in that way. But I also saw a lot of the people who were my friends and classmates were facing similar things did not have access to that same kind of support system. So that was something that I wrestled with for a long time, the quote unquote survivor's guilt. There's very few young people who have experienced, homelessness, housing insecurity, group homes, juvenile incarceration, and also get to be seen as a leader in certain spaces, also get to go to college, also get to be provided different access to resources and opportunities. And so I recognize wow, this is not happening for most of the folks who look like me, who are coming from similar backgrounds. And so I started organizing in college around issues around racial and economic and social justice with a living wage campaign at the University of Virginia. And then fast forward to 2019, I had moved to California. I had been organizing with Black Lives Matter Los Angeles for a number of years outside of my day job against state-sanctioned violence. And for my day job, I was doing labor organizing. And through Black Lives Matter Los Angeles, I got connected to Students Deserve and saw this beautiful organization with really powerful Black youth leaders who were talking about some of the things that I had experienced in my childhood, but did not have the words for at that time. I'm sorry, I'm getting emotional. But yeah, really, really powerful youth leaders like Marsha Doss and Jairi Tannen and so many others, right? And I was eventually invited to apply to work with Students Deserve. And I've been on staff with Students Deserve since 2019, getting to work with folks like Kahlila and Laquel White and so many other really, really powerful youth leaders, Sierra Leone Anderson. I just like name dropping all my folks because they're awesome. And yeah, have been able to work with young people who are just brilliant and powerful and are able to see the things that are happening to them in real time and say, nah, this is not okay. We deserve better. We deserve to be cared for and not criminalized and not pushed out and not put in cages when we're dealing with trauma, and to try to support them in organizing to make that a reality.
Joseph, thank you so much for such a powerful testimony. As you were talking, I was like, wow, what would have been in the world if Joseph hadn't met the great folks who saw your brilliance, that brilliance that was always there, right? How would our community be if someone hadn't invested in Joseph, and then Joseph in turn invested in so many brilliant leaders? So thank you for bringing their names into the room, because a lot of times we don't know the countless young people who made the world better. And I couldn't help thinking about why does this happen? If you had to tell a community member, a young person, why the default response was assuming that if you're hanging out, there's something that needs to be interrupted and needs to be rounded up by police. Why is the world that way? What would you say?
Sheesh. Through my own history and trying to understand what has happened to Black and other racialized communities and poor communities, I realized this is not new. Obviously the Black Lives Matter movement and, the work that the Movement for Black Lives and Students Deserve and many other people are working on in this day and age is this iteration of the Black liberation movement. But there have been movements against the criminalization and abuse of our people that go back decades and centuries, and so seeing, even the 13th Amendment and the way in which criminalization has been used ever since the abolition of slavery as an intentional tool for social control. And we know, even before the abolition of slavery, that there were laws, there were slave codes, there were Black codes. And after the abolition of slavery, there were Jim Crow laws, there were Black codes as well, that really serve the purpose of control, right? Of controlling Black folks, indigenous folks, poor folks, and that police very much serve a similar function today. And that starts at a very young age, right? It's not a coincidence that it was literally illegal for enslaved people to read. Right, that Frederick Douglass learning to read was an act of resistance that could have been punishable by any manner of things, right? And it often was, because the education of Black young people and indigenous young people as well, right? We think about the indigenous residential schools where children were stolen from their families and tried to be indoctrinated, right? To assimilate into a white supremacist European culture. And it's very much similar now, right? The schooling system is not necessarily always, although we have really powerful and beautiful educators, the schooling system as a whole has not been meant for the liberation of our folks, right? It's meant to be a tool to shape people into what this white supremacist society has wanted us to be. And when they feel like we are resistant to that, or we're resistant to that shaping, then the response is push out and criminalization. So yeah, it was helpful to me to learn, oh, this is not about me being deficient. It's about this whole larger system of white supremacy that uses and has used the system of education and attacks on Black children as like a fundamental piece of maintaining its rule over the world that we live in. So that's a big theoretical answer, but it's like ultimately policing and criminalization have been tools of racial and social control forever in this context, in the context of the United States. They have always been tools to oppress Black and Indigenous and other folks. And we see that every single day with the way that school police treat folks in our schools, and also the way that, the broader system of policing and mass incarceration treats racialized and poor communities throughout the United States.
Thank you for breaking it down, Joseph. Like, it's always helpful to be reminded that the way some of our cultures and systems have been set up is inherently to inflict violence on children, right? And so the power of investing in children's ability and brilliance to have an analysis and to transform that is really, really essential, because they're directly living it. And these are some really serious times, right? We see that it's definitely a return of a commitment to social control in the bodies of young people. And so, Kahlila, I wanted to ask you, what's happening to and with young people in LA? What are young people facing, and how is Students Deserve responding to the challenges that they're facing?
I think young people are facing a lot right now. Since the implementation of the newest administration, we have seen an attack on our Black and undocumented and queer students within, at least within our district, but also the young folks that we work with around LA. And it's really disheartening to see. We also have a lot of very powerful youth who are standing up, who are fighting back and against it. And that's been really powerful again to see, as I said, because it's just a reminder that there are people in this world who will fight against and won't let things happen to them. And there's just so many attacks going on within our schools. Every day I feel like we're hearing a new one, whether students are getting kidnapped by ICE, or whether students are facing problems with school police still, because they're still trying to implement school police in some way or some fashion, even though we removed them from our district. And that's a lot of what we have seen. And so that led for us at the beginning of 2025 to change our work that we're doing to protect Black, undocumented, and LGBTQ students. And that's our current campaign. So the work that we are doing is centering those that are at the height of the administration, are constantly being criminalized, have been for years, but face even more challenges now. And so with the shift into our work, we're making sure that these students know that they are protected, and that there are people, there are students, their peers are fighting for them. And so that has led to us getting a lot of wins. We got a $50 million investment back into the Black Student Achievement Plan, which is critical in a time in which you're hearing, oh, we can't talk about Black, we can't talk about different races. And we also got an investment into our LGBTQIA plus studies, as well as into our dream centers. And so in this time where it's in the face of, oh, we're not talking about Black, and we don't care about undocumented people in general, as well as a lot of our LGBTQIA plus people are losing rights, we get this investment from our school district. And it's just well, everyone's saying it can't be done and it's not going to happen. Do you see who's in office, and do you see who's holding these positions of power? They're never going to do it. We're constantly sending reminders that actually it can and it will be done. So our students are fighting for exactly just that. And they're making wins, and they're pushing for those changes. And we've seen those wins happening. And so we know that when we're told that, something won't happen or it can't happen, it just fuels our fire even more. So that's definitely what we're bringing as Students Deserve into the work. But as well as in the coalitions that we build, we're constantly working with other organizations in LA, hosting works around like, what does it look like? How to identify ICE in your community? If you see ICE, how do you respond? Making sure that our students and Students Deserve are prepared for those conversations, but also with other organizations who we're in constant community with. And at the same time, constantly fighting back against police in our schools. When we say we demand a police-free school, we're never backing down. So constantly uplifting that movement, uplifting that work, because that's really been a big part of what we've seen since policing has existed as a system. It has been constantly to criminalize Black students, to criminalize Black people, starting as slave catchers and now being introduced into our schools, where what do? They criminalize Black youth at an even higher rate than our peers and others in our schools. So we're continuously fighting back against that, because we know that there's resources like restorative justice and psychiatric social workers and school climate coaches and nurses and counselors, that if we had those things in our schools, that it truly make it a better place. But we haven't had that consistent investment into things to truly see it work. So when our schools are saying, oh, well, this happened, so we need school police again. No, that's not how this works. We understand that if you actually implement into the resources that we've been calling for, that change will happen. But you can't jump at every source of something going wrong, of like the need is school police and the need is police or some type of policing. That's not how this works. So we're continuing to fight against that. We're continuing to fight against the administrations and continuing to also fight to make sure the things that we win get implemented. We know that when we fought to defund the school police, we said we wanted that money to go to Black students. We fought to make sure that it did. And now we have a Black Student Achievement Plan. But not only that, we fought to make sure that the teachers union included that in their contract, to where we recognize that the Black Student Achievement Plan cannot not exist. And we've fought to make sure that, more money in this time gets invested into that program. So now we're going to fight to make sure that the money that they just invested goes into the BSAP program, that it gets invested into our LGBTQ studies, and to support and resources for our LGBTQ youth. And we're also going to continue to fight to make sure that we have these dream centers and other support for undocumented students during this time, and recognize that this is shaping all communities, Black and Brown, and communities from all over, whether media only highlight that Brown communities are being affected right now.
Kahlila, and it's so powerful when we heard that y'all had that victory where you were able to protect the Black Student Achievement Plan. It gave so many people so much hope, because definitely folks were feeling like this is a really difficult time to continue to, one, say Black. We care about the Black community. And there have been, at least in the nonprofit sector and philanthropy, the lawyers, like you name it, it was all this anti-DEI rhetoric trying to scare people from naming the exact demand in the community that we center. And so I wanted to kind of ask you, Joseph, a little bit about, how did you do it? How did you confront this changing political climate across the board, where folks are being scared and intimidated to take Black out of everything, right? And how did you support people to come to step to the line to protect queer youth, immigrant youth? We know that this administration has not been friendly towards that, and they've actually found really aggressive ways of making folks try to cower down, and y'all didn't do that. Not only did you not do that, but you blew it out the park. You won, you protected, you got more investment. And so that victory was so inspiring for other organizers and communities, for everyone who was like on the fence. What do we do? Should we back down? And y'all did not do that. So what does it actually take to support young people, teachers, principals, community members, funders, like all the folks, to hold the line and to lean in? What were some of the things y'all had to do to get folks recommitted and continue to be courageous in doing the work?
I mean, number one, it starts with young people like Kahlila and like we named, like young people in LA over the past year have not said, oh my gosh, our communities are under attack by ICE. Let's hide under the couch. Let's, whatever it is, cower in fear and hope that they don't come to us. They said, nah, let's fight back. Young people have led massive walkouts throughout the district. Young people have led community self-defense, young people and educators. Shout out to our folks in UTLA, the Teachers Union, Cecily Maillard Cruz, first Black and first Latina president of UTLA, and also to many of the rank and file educators who are doing really important work. Some who are members of Students Deserve, some who are members of organizations like Unión del Barrio and the Community Self-Defense Coalition, who are leading like some of the responses to ICE, leading some of the patrols, leading some of the connecting folks to resources, connecting folks to lawyers, connecting folks to know your rights, information, and to how they can protect themselves, and not just protect themselves, but build community entities that can fight back. Right? Because ultimately, one of the functions of this system is also to isolate us and to disconnect us. Divide and conquer is very real, both like within communities, right? Black against brown and against Native and against this, that, and the third. And even within our communities, the Latino folks who have been here for a while versus the new immigrants, right? There's always attempts to divide and turn folks against each other. And there's also attempts to make us feel like we are individuals. And so Kahlila mentioned earlier that we also see that as an organization. Like, we don't think Students Deserve as an entity or any one 501c3 is going to bring about the salvation of our folks. And so we actually don't run almost any campaign on our own. We work in coalition intentionally with the Teachers Union, with folks like Black Lives Matter Los Angeles, and with the Police Free LAUSD Coalition, which helped to really shape the victories that Kahlila named and these investments that Kahlila named. And so, for one, it comes from us saying, look, if young people are fighting back in this unapologetic way, how could we not? As I mentioned earlier, I definitely see myself as, and we as Students Deserve see ourselves as a vessel and a support system for the young people who are really leading this fight. And that means having really difficult conversations in a lot of different ways. And I've had funders tell us, you can't say Black. Don't put the Black Student Achievement Plan in your grant report. And it's like, okay, I might not put it in the grant report or whatever, but best believe we're not backing down from our principles. And more importantly, we're not backing down from what young people are demanding and what young people deserve. And so, yeah, it definitely takes a commitment to the principles that we have to be an abolitionist organization, to be a Black-centered organization. We're not going to stop saying Black. We're not going to stop saying make Black Lives Matter in schools. We're not going to stop saying that the Black Student Achievement Plan is absolutely necessary. And also it means really building deeply coalitions and partnerships to help advance the work. It means building deep relationships with organizations who represent immigrant communities, building deep relationships with organizations who represent parents, with organizations like UTLA, again, who represent educators. And so that's been a big part of our strategy, and our ability to win is by both building and sustaining coalitions, broad and deep coalitions that represent multiple different communities, multiple different demographics, but coalitions that are also saying, and we're unapologetically going to stand on our abolitionist principles, going to stand on our principles of solidarity, going to stand on our principles of naming and calling out anti-Blackness wherever we see it. I mean, we're not going to stop doing that because, there's a new administration or because people are threatening our funding or whatever. We have to resist. Our communities demand it.
That's really powerful. And Kahlila, you've been right at the front of, supporting other young people to do that really beautiful, careful, principled work of building coalitions, right? As you think about what this political season will require, not just of young people, but of different formations and organizations, right? And y'all are like helping bring all these orgs together and also helping create space for us to learn how to transcend individualism, to ground in solidarity and abolitionist principles. And, it's not easy. Working with groups, with people, it takes time and love. And so I'm curious for you, like, what are the qualities that you are helping other folks learn? What are the practices that y'all are deepening into that make coalition building possible, especially in light of this political season that our communities are facing? And how do you do it? How do you teach and cultivate those qualities and practices amongst different community members?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is recognizing the power and agency that our youth have. You know, when I first got into this work, if I had $1 for every time someone said, like, well, you don't know, you're only 16, you're only this, whatever, you're too young to understand, I'd be rich right now, because it's just this constant reminder of how young you are. You don't have power until I see the victories and the wins that we have. And it's like, who doesn't have power? And so it's also reminding other people, because even in the spaces that we're in as organizers, you constantly have to remind somebody that we as youth have this agency and this power and this knowledge, and not this deficit mindset, and that we can do the work and we can be at the center of the work and we can lead a campaign and we can get wins and we can do all the things. And we can do it no matter what age we start in. But if we are given that agency, it took for me to get the knowledge of, okay, what I've been experiencing and what I know has been happening was the school to prison pipeline that made me want to get involved. And so it took me of that, like somebody giving me that education beyond your ancestors were slaves. It took us beyond, all of these things that we hear in our traditional education curriculum, that I started to finally learn, that made me stand up and be in power and be in community. And then I'm like, okay, I know what this means. And now I can call it out when I see it, and realize that I can call it out. I can call it out in the moment when it's actually happening, and I can call it out right after. And so, like, one of the biggest things in this work is, like, every youth may know the knowledge and may know the education and the steps that it will take, but tell them what that looks like, and trust and believe they will make it happen. Trust and believe they're willing to be standing up in the forefront if you actually support them in a community. Build those relationships and support them. It wasn't just that Students Deserve gave me the knowledge and then said, go do whatever. I was supported by my teacher at my school when I was going through starting a chapter at my school and I felt like I couldn't do it. I was supported by Joseph when I was just like, can I really do this? And what does this look like? I was supported by so many people in this space that literally are now my family because of it. And then I also had my peers, and now I'm seeing them all do great things, and also working as Students Deserve and becoming full-time or part-time and going to school and doing all of the things. It just shows you, like, it can be done, but you need support and you need that education and you need to let them do it. Don't just also say, like, oh, we have a youth-led campaign and it's really all of the adults that are having these conversations and there's no youth there. You need to put the youth in the spaces. You need to put them at that table. And I think for me, one of, like, the biggest quotes, especially being in, like, education, is you can't just put people at the table for them to be on the menu. You have to put them at the table. And so that's been truly something that I recognize every time. It's just reminding them that you can do it and that we have that power and that we will do it, but also just recognizing the moments and the times that we have. Right now is similar to 2020 in a lot of different ways. The attacks that we saw on Black individuals, maybe it might have been more at the forefront of our social media and our media in general, of, like, Black people are being killed. Does not mean that that's not happening right now, but we see the attacks also in different ways, whether it's through anti-DEI or whether it's through you can't say Black, or whether it's through all of these different things. These attacks are still happening. And so we are at this time where we're saying, well, look, it's happening all over again. And what did we do before? We held nationwide and worldwide uprisings, and there was people from all over who were calling for support and calling for resources for Black individuals, because it was an eye-opener of, oh my God, police brutality actually exists, even though we've been calling this out for years. And so we can say this again. Our administration is attacking Black people again, as it has been done before. And we can say it again, that undocumented individuals hold a significant place in this world, and we need to protect them. And our support for our LGBTQ people are being attacked, and we need to support them. And so this is a moment in time that we have where it's that people need to realize it's just the same eye-opening event. That if you felt like something mattered before in 2020, it matters again every day. And when you took that step away from the work, and when you took that step away from this movement because you're like, well, Black people got some more resources and we acknowledged, brutality, and I did what I could. Or when these big corporations and companies and funders say, oh, well, I had a slogan for Black Lives Matter on my website for a year, or, a year and a half. I did what I could do. That's never enough until you put that funding into the work and support organizations that are doing the work and support the young people that are doing this work and actually stand up and continue to be a part of that fight. Because this fight that y'all may have saw in 2020 is a fight that we have been fighting for years, been fighting since our ancestors were slaves, been fighting since 2020 when everything was acknowledged. And just because it's not as highlighted in your media does not mean it's not happening. So how do you reflect on what is going on and reflect that you need to get involved in this work? And how do we start those nationwide uprisings again? And how do we get people out in those streets? And how do we get people to start investing us again? Because this fight is still happening, whether people realize it or not.
Thank you, Kahlila. And this is really interesting, this theme of like the past is continuously repeating itself. And every time y'all are coming back and building more and more power, right? And so, Joseph, I was just wanting to see if we could switch gears a little bit and you turn your cap sideways and talk a little bit about your brilliant strategist mind, right? And I know you don't do it by yourself. I know you're doing it with a bunch of young people who are brilliant themselves. Kahlila just explained, when you support young people, it works and you win, right? And you transform policies and systems and practices and orientations to each other and to community. But as you wear your movement strategist hat, right? And reflecting on your work in labor organizing, its connections to young people and education, how y'all built enough power, because I'm sure there's try and test and come back and do it again and get better each time. What do you see is on the horizon for our communities, for youth across the country? And what would you like us to really prepare for? Kahlila said the past has come back and it has always been here. And there's also different messages about what's on the horizon. So how, using strategy, how should we prepare for? What are we preparing for? What do we need to do?
Lots of big questions here. I want to also just say really quickly on the last point, Kahlila played a major role in our summer internship this year. We had 23 students from 12 different high schools, and Kahlila helped lead them, and Kahlila and other alumni that we had helped lead them through political education and organizing trainings and how do we spot ICE and do community self-defense work, and also did that deeply in partnership with coalitions. One of the days was at the UTLA building with our union partners. One of the days was at Young Women's Freedom Center. One of the days we had the Community Self-Defense Coalition come in and teach us how to spot ICE and how to respond. And so I say that because all of these things are deeply necessary and important as we think about the road ahead. I named earlier that the 501c3 movement, if you can call it a movement, the 501c3, the nonprofit industrial complex was absolutely created as a way to siphon the revolutionary rage from our movements and say, okay, put it over there in nonprofits and don't join the Black Panthers. Don't join the Brown Berets. Don't join, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All the different organizations that were really saying, no, we need a different system. We need a different system than the one we currently exist in. And that's absolutely, I think, what is necessary right now. It's absolutely a time to resist, to continue to resist. And it's also a time to build. We've seen these attacks against our communities escalating. And I want to also name that this is not something that's unique to the Trump administration. The cop cities that we're seeing, the massive expansion of funding for law enforcement and the infrastructure that Trump is now using on our communities actually was built up under Biden, was built up under Obama, right? Obama was called the deporter in chief, right, at one point. And so it's really important that we don't, make this like, oh, if the Republicans get voted out, then we're going to be okay. And it's just midterm elections, 2026. Like, nah, homie, this is a system that has absolutely been a project of the ruling class in this country, and a system, as Kahlila named, of social and racial control. And unfortunately, it is not going to slow down, right? We know that even with just some of the bills that have been passed earlier this year, that as much as ICE has been terrorizing our communities, that's going to increase, right? Some of the funding from the big, horrible bill or whatever it's called doesn't even get released until October 2nd, right? We've had unprecedented ICE raids in LA, and they're going to increase. We have seen a massive increase in police shootings and police killings in LA. Already this year, there's been more police shootings in LA than there were the entirety of last year, and we still got 4 months left. Even though that's not being talked about, we're seeing it, and we know it's going to continue to expand. And so it's deeply important for us to continue to build a working class movement that is not limited to the nonprofit industrial complex, to be deepening our relationships with organized labor, to be deepening our relationships with, again, community organizations in different ways, including ones who do not fall within the traditional 501c3 network, and also to be building the alternative. We as abolitionists, we talk a lot about police don't mean safety, and we keep us safe. And we have to be showing people who have not already been a part of abolitionist movement what that means in this moment. This is a moment when more and more people are seeing the harms of policing and of law enforcement, folks snatching people out of their communities, military occupation of cities, et cetera, et cetera. And so that means it's also an opportunity that we have to help to activate people, to help to say, yeah, you're seeing that, and this is part of the solution. You can be part of the solution. You can help to build networks in your community. For example, mutual aid networks that are helping to bring food to immigrant families who are afraid to leave their homes so that they won't get snatched up. You can help build community self-defense networks to help patrol your communities and support your neighbors who are in need, and document when we're seeing surveillance and criminalization that may lead to further attacks on our communities. And so that's definitely what we are seeing, a need to really invest in. What does building the alternative in this movement, in this moment rather, look like? What does it look like to support students to actually start to build out a plan for what will I do if this happens to my family member? Or what will I do if I see an ICE raid in my community? Or what will I do if I see an incident of police brutality or anything? Or if, there's a interpersonal violence in my community and I know I can't call the police. How are we building this muscle with young people who can then be those leaders who are showing their classmates, showing their families, showing their parents and teachers and community members the alternative? Because unfortunately, I think more harm will happen, right? More of our folks will be snatched up. More of our folks will be murdered. We can't act like that's not going to happen. George Jackson said 50 years ago, fascism is already here. And so if we're just thinking that Donald Trump brought in fascism, we're late. We're late to the party. And so what are we doing to build an alternative that's actually helping people to see and experience that we can actually exist differently, that we can be in relationship with each other differently, that safety can look differently, that solidarity and community can look differently. But that takes a lot of real work. That takes being willing to get to know your neighbors. That takes being willing to do walks in the neighborhood and do canvassing and talking to people and connecting people and understanding how we can connect our folks who have not been connected to these movements in ways that are meaningful and impactful to them, and that help them see that they can be a part of building something that's different. So that's some of what we're trying to deepen and dive into. And again, I think especially at a time when we see that this is not just Donald Trump's agenda, this is a billionaire agenda. We saw all the tech billionaires at his inauguration. We've seen them clapping. We've seen the advance of techno-fascism and the surveillance state and all these other things. And so it is deeply important to be building a working class movement, to be working with, labor unions and pulling them to the left and pulling them to take stances that they haven't taken before, so that we can really harness and actualize the power that we have when we come together. Not just around, what are our wages and benefits, but what is the future we want to see for our schools, for our communities, for our young people that looks different and better than the one we're existing in.
Thank you, Joseph. And, sometimes it's hard to imagine, but I hear descriptions of what it feels like, what it looks like, how we move in the future. Now, y'all are literally doing it, and the future we wish for all of us. And so, Kahlila, I'm just wondering if you could describe the abolitionist future. How do young people feel? What do they see? How are they treated? Help us imagine the world that y'all are working so hard to build.
Whew, I feel like unpacking that question has so many different components because you could just literally grab from education and healthcare and climate change, like all of these things. And it's like it looks like so many different things. I think ultimately it's a world where we're supported and invested in. It's a world where everyone is free. It's a world without prisons and police and all of these other systems that come within that, like ICE and DHS and all these things. I think just reflecting on a lot of the work we do, I think it's a world where Black men aren't being seen as something to be scared of or criminals at a young age. I think allowing them to be boys, where Black girls aren't getting over sexualized from young ages. It's where youth can be with their families and not worry about them being separated. It's a world where we can go to schools and just get educated and go beyond the education that we're learning right now, but an education that truly shows us what it looks like to be culturally responsive and what does it look like to center all perspectives. It looks like young people not being criminalized and thrown in jail at young ages. It looks like a world where the environment is being cared for. It looks like a world where we have universal health care. It looks like a world where people can get education that's the same across the boards and not have to pay tuition for a private school education in order to actually learn something. It's a world where higher education isn't more than people's means and they're paying off thousands of dollars of debt afterward. It's just a world where it's so many things align that there's just truly a place of rest, of relaxation, of not fighting tooth and nail for everything that you need. It's a world where we can smile at our neighbor and know that they're doing okay and that we're just in community with each other and loving on one another and not having to, as I said, like keep up this fight and keep up this smile that isn't really there sometimes or all of these things. So it's just a world that is so much beautiful than this one. It's a world that is truly a place that we need, and that's what everyone is fighting for. It's a world where we reflect on our own lives and realize that what happened to us when we were 5 years old and 10 years old and 15 years old doesn't have to happen to us anymore, and that we won't see this happening. The world that we're creating right now, we recognize is not going to happen for us, but it's going to happen for these younger generations. And so I recognize it's a world where my younger siblings and my younger peers and just anybody is going to grow up and feel like this is a world worth living in. Because a lot of times we wake up and it's like, you wake up and it's like, damn, I'm still in America and things are still happening. And so it's just a world that is just a lot beautiful than this one.
Thank you. As you were describing the world that you've been fighting for and loving so hard for, because the work y'all are doing is deeply rooted in love, my heart just like opened and my shoulders dropped and a smile came because I'm like, I want that for you. I want that for me. I want that for all our babies. And so thank you for reminding us. You talked earlier about reminders, the power of celebrating the agency of young people and reminding each other, like, we can build that world. We're doing it now, and we want to see it everywhere, right? And that we have to do work to get there. And so I wanted to give y'all a chance in closing to put out your call to action. And so you might have young people listening. You might have parents, caregivers. You might have system leaders who keep supporting the same policies that are producing the worst possible outcomes, right? And they're like thinking, I'm doing the right thing, right? What is your call to action? You might have philanthropy who's like, we want to do good, but we won't do X, Y, and Z, or we can't fund X, Y, and Z, right? What is your call to action for the listening audience? How they can support the power of youth organizers? Where should they go? What can they do?
I think my call is to get involved. Simply as that, I think that no matter where you are, there's some type of organization that is doing some type of work, and there's different types of work. Whether you feel like, okay, well, I'm not really, wanting to change education right in this moment, but I want to change the climate and the environment. There's people doing that work, and there's people doing work in education, and there's people doing work for equitable healthcare. And there's all types of work being done that there's more than a million different ways to get involved. And so whether you're a young person or whether you've been in this world for many years and you want to get involved, that's fine too. It doesn't matter what age or how you look or how you think. I just get involved in the work that people are doing and recognize that power of change because it's there. And once you recognize that, you'll never want to leave. And I say to, those who are just also like in philanthropy or like funding, fund the work that's actually pushing strides to the world that we just talked about of what does that look like and what does that imagine? Because that same feeling that you described is how we can feel every day if also all of these people and all of these organizations that are doing the work, had that funding and support and those resources as well. And recognize that somebody in this work told me we're a global majority instead of calling ourselves a minority. And I think that's so powerful because if every single one of us who considers ourselves a minority or marginalized stands up and actually fights for what we want, these billionaires won't have power. And it won't matter who's in office because we'll be stirring up the pot and we'll be making the changes that we truly want to see. So just recognize that we have so much power than people actually realize. And how do you recognize your own power? So I think that's my call to action is getting involved in recognizing your power and fund and support and give the resources to those that are doing this work.
Thank you, Kahlila. And you, Joseph, any closing call to action?
Yeah, I think my call to action, I mentioned George Jackson earlier, but there's a quote that I just keep returning to that I think a lot of people hopefully are returning to in this time. It says, settle your quarrels, come together, understand the reality of our situation, understand that fascism is already here, that people are already dying who could be saved, that generations more will live poor, butchered half-lives if you fail to act. Do what must be done. Discover your humanity and your love in revolution. And yeah, it is a time to discover our humanity. It is a time to say, I'm not going to go along because I might lose my job. I'm going to resist, right? We are living in an era where we can look back and know that, wow, the genocide of the Holocaust happened. And it happened in part, not just because of Hitler, but because every day people said, okay, yeah, if my boss told me to do this, I'm just going to do it. I don't want to lose my job or I don't want to take this risk, so I'm not going to stand up. And so millions and millions of people contributed to horrific things. And I think similarly right now is a time when people have to understand that that is happening now, that this is an age where we have got to resist, where we've got to discover our humanity and our love in revolution. And that comes with sacrifice and that comes with harm. Our communities are already being harmed and we can't be afraid of losing a job or losing a grant or offending somebody or whatever the case may be. We've got to do what we know is right. We've got to resist. We've got to try to build a world that's different. We've got to support folks like Kahlila and other young people who are helping to show us that the world can be different. And so, yeah, like Kahlila said, everywhere you are, you can resist there. In some way, you can resist there everywhere you are. So really grateful to be in movement with young people who are demonstrating it, right? Who are living abolition every day, who are living a different world every day by the way that they show up for their loved ones, for their community members, for their neighbors, for their family. And yeah, follow that example. And again, just discover your humanity and your love in revolution, as our comrade George said.
Thank you both. May the spirit of love and support just seep through everything. Thank you. That was Joseph Williams and Kahlila Williams from Students Deserve. Los Angeles is the largest public school district in California and the second largest in the nation, serving over 600,000 students across more than 1,000 schools. Students Deserve organizes over 30 chapters across the district, and their success staving off the rollback of the Black Student Achievement Plan is giving deep hope in a time when forceful attacks are coming at our youth and public education. The Black Student Achievement Plan delivers specific interventions young people need to transform schools from sites of criminalization to ones of care. Yet, recent federal policy is painting it as preferential treatment and criminalizing it. However, John Powell teaches us that targeted universalism allows us to care for the specific and unique needs of different groups while protecting the whole. Making sure all youth are treated with dignity and care is good for the whole of us. Students Deserve teaches us that young people are brilliant and they're leading with courage. They've taught us that coalition building is integral to building power. They've created a bigger tent that includes parents, teachers, labor unions, immigrants' rights organizations, modeling Black and brown, queer, immigrant, caregiver, youth, and teacher solidarity with a capital S. Finally, as Joseph said, there are significant challenges on the horizon. Next year, the LAUSD school district may face up to $110 million in funding cuts, which will hinder teacher training, services to English language learners, after-school programs, education for migrant students, and student support and academic enrichment. Now, more than ever, we need youth organizing to protect funding and interventions that center care, not control. As Students Deserve lead the way, they remind us of a lesson. Follow the young people. Our pod was produced by CJSF and Phil Circus and our organizing partners and donor members. Thanks for listening. Please like, subscribe, and share our podcast with someone else looking to join the movement of youth power and education justice. Thank you.